the billionaire gave the maids toddler noodles. 10 years later, he lost everything. But she came back with $1 billion. The rain was falling hard that Tuesday evening in March when everything changed, though nobody knew it yet. Marcus Harrington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 52nd floor of Harrington Tower, watching the city of Chicago bleed neon light into puddles 40 stories below. At 34, he had everything a man could want. $3 billion in net worth. A real estate empire stretching from Chicago to Dubai. His face on the cover of Forbes twice. A jaw so sharp people joked it could cut glass, and a heart, they also joked, that matched it. He was not a cruel man. He just didn't have time to be soft. His assistant, Derek, kept a list of all the things Marcus didn't have time for. Charity galas, birthday calls, small talk, feelings. The list was long, but Marcus didn't care. He had buildings to build, deals to close, a legacy to cement. Feelings were for people who could afford to lose. That night, he had just ended a call that would finalize a $400 million acquisition when he heard it, a sound so small and broken it almost didn't reach him through the thick office walls. Crying. Not adult crying. Not the polished, embarrassed tears of someone who didn't want to be caught. This was a child crying. The raw, helpless kind that comes from a place deep and honest, the kind that only toddlers cry when the world has simply become too big and too cold and too much. Marcus frowned. His office was supposed to be cleared. Everyone was supposed to be gone. He walked out of his office into the wide, marble hallway and followed the sound until he found it, just around the corner by the service elevator, huddled on the cold floor, a tiny little girl. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old. She had dark curly hair stuck to her wet cheeks, huge brown eyes swimming with tears, and she was clutching a worn, faded stuffed elephant to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. She was wearing a little yellow raincoat, 2 sizes too big. Her shoes were soaked through. Marcus stopped. He had no framework for this. No protocol. No experience. "Hey," he said. His voice came out harder than he intended, the way it always did when he didn't know what to feel. The little girl looked up at him with those enormous eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just looked at him, searching his face the way children do, deciding in 2 seconds whether this person was safe. She must have decided yes, because she hiccuped and said, in the tiniest voice he had ever heard, "I'm hungry." 2 words. That's all it took. Something cracked open in Marcus Harrington's chest, a fracture so thin and quiet that he almost missed it. Almost. He looked down the hallway toward the executive kitchen. He was already moving before he made the decision. The kitchen was mostly cleaned up for the night, but his staff always kept it stocked for his late nights. Marcus opened cabinets with the efficiency of a man used to making fast decisions. He found instant noodles. Not fancy. Not the kind of thing that belonged in a building like this. Just a plain yellow packet of chicken noodles. He made them the way the packet said, boiling water, 3 minutes, stir. He added a little butter because it seemed right. He found a small bowl and poured them in and let them cool just enough to not burn a small mouth. He carried the bowl back down the hallway and set it on the floor, the cold, polished, imported marble floor of Harrington Tower, and sat down across from a 3-year-old like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked at the bowl, then at him, then at the bowl again. "It's noodles," he said. "You like noodles?" She nodded, very serious. "Good. Me too," he said. He had never actually eaten instant noodles in his adult life, but it felt like the right thing to say. She sat down and picked up the small fork he had brought and started eating with the focused, joyful intensity that only hungry toddlers have. Steam rising from the bowl, curls falling into her face, the stuffed elephant propped against the wall beside her like a dinner guest. Marcus watched her and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Something quiet. Something good. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked up, cheeks full. "Lily," she said, noodles and all. "I'm Marcus." She considered this. That's a big name, she said. He almost smiled. Almost. It is. Where's your mom, Lily? And just like that, the little chin wobbled. She's crying, Lily whispered. She got in trouble. She dropped the mop bucket and it spilled everywhere, and the man yelled at her, and she said go wait by the elevator, and she's been crying for a long time. Marcus went very still. He knew immediately who she meant. Rosa, the night cleaning crew. A woman he had passed in hallways 100 times without ever really seeing. A woman who cleaned the floors of his empire every single night, who left before sunrise, who he had never once said good morning to. And her 3-year-old daughter had been sitting alone in a cold hallway crying because she was hungry while her mother was getting yelled at by one of his floor managers, no doubt, for spilling water. The fracture in his chest got a little wider. He stood up. He straightened his $4,000 suit jacket. He walked back down the hallway, following the low sound of muffled weeping until he found a woman sitting on an overturned bucket in the service corridor, face in her hands, shoulders shaking. She was young, late 20s maybe. She had the same dark curly hair as Lily, the same honest brown eyes, red-rimmed now, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with tonight, and everything to do with every night before it. She looked up when she heard his footsteps and froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid with the particular terror of someone who expects to be fired. "Mr. Harrington," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the damage. Please, I need this job." "Stop," he said.
She stopped.
"Your daughter is eating noodles in the hallway," he said. "Come get her when you're ready." He paused. He looked at this woman, really looked at her for the first time. Nobody's losing their job tonight. He turned and walked away before she could see whatever was happening on his face. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know that she would change his life. But something in him already knew that tonight, this cold, wet Tuesday with the rain on the windows and a little girl and a bowl of cheap noodles, was the night something real had finally begun. Her name was Rosa Mendez, and she had been cleaning the floors of Harrington Tower for 2 years without once being seen. Not invisible in a mysterious way. Invisible in the way that poor people are invisible to powerful ones, present everywhere, noticed nowhere, essential to everything, acknowledged by no one. She wiped the marble clean so it would shine for men in expensive shoes who never looked down. She scrubbed the glass elevators so they gleamed for executives who rode them without thinking. She made the building beautiful every single night and then disappeared before sunrise like a ghost who had done her job. Rosa was 28 years old, and she was tired in a way that had no good word in English. In Spanish, her grandmother used to call it el cansancio del alma, the tiredness of the soul. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that settles into your bones after years of working too hard for too little, of stretching one paycheck across too many days, of smiling at people who look through you. She had Lily when she was 25. The father left before Lily took her first breath, not dramatically, not with a fight, just quietly, the way some men do, like smoke through an open window. Rosa hadn't had time to be angry. She'd been too busy being a mother. She brought Lily to work on nights when the babysitter canceled, and she had no other choice and no money to fix it. She hated doing it. She hated the risk, the vulnerability of needing something from a world that had made clear it wasn't interested in her needs. But she hated the alternative more, Lily alone in their apartment on the south side, 3 years old, with nothing but cartoons and worry. So she brought her daughter, and she prayed nobody important would notice. On that Tuesday night, Marcus Harrington had noticed, and he hadn't fired her. She sat in the service corridor for a long time after he walked away, her hands still shaking, her heart still hammering. She had braced herself for the worst. That was what experience had taught her to do. Always brace. Always expect the hammer to fall. Because in Rosa's life, kindness from powerful men usually had a price tag she couldn't afford. But he had just walked away. She found Lily around the corner, sitting cross-legged on the marble floor, bowl in her lap, noodles nearly gone, stuffed elephant watching from the wall like a proud parent. She had the relaxed, contented look of a child who has been fed and feels safe, and Rosa's throat closed up completely. "Mama," Lily said, looking up with a face full of innocence. "The big-name man made me noodles." Rosa sat down on the floor beside her daughter, the cold marble floor of a billionaire's building, and pulled her into her arms and held her tight, and did not cry. She had already cried enough tonight. She pressed her face into Lily's curls, which smelled like rain and cheap shampoo and something so achingly sweet it hurt, and she breathed. "We're okay," she told herself. "We're still here." Over the weeks that followed, something shifted. Not dramatically. Marcus Harrington was not a man who did dramatic things in his personal life, only in his business life. But Rosa noticed small changes. The floor manager who had yelled at her was suddenly reassigned. A new policy appeared in the cleaning staff handbook about children in emergency situations. A quiet policy, 3 sentences, never announced. And once, just once, she came into the executive kitchen to clean it at midnight and found it stocked with fresh instant noodles on the bottom shelf. Just instant noodles. Nothing else. Like someone had put them there on purpose. She told herself not to read into it.
But she thought about him.
She couldn't help it. She thought about the way he had looked at Lily, not with pity, not with performance, but with something raw and real that had flashed across his face before he could put his walls back up. She thought about the way he had sat on the floor. Marcus Harrington, $3 billion Marcus Harrington, sitting on the floor of his own building to keep a 3-year-old company. She didn't tell anyone. Who would she tell? And what would she say? "The billionaire made my daughter noodles." It would sound like a fairy tale. But fairy tales, Rosa knew, were for people who hadn't learned yet that the world was mostly just hard work and small joys and staying on your feet when everything tried to knock you down. She stayed on her feet. She kept working. She kept saving every dollar she could, every dollar that didn't go to rent and groceries and Lily's daycare and the bus pass and the secondhand shoes. She had a dream that lived in the back of her head like a small but stubborn fire, a cleaning business of her own. Not working for someone else's building. Her own. Her name on the contract. Her schedule. Her dignity intact. It was a dream that felt impossible on the nights when she was most tired. On those nights, she would look at Lily sleeping, dark curls spread on the pillow, stuffed elephant tucked under one arm, and the fire would come back. "For you," she would think. "All of it is for you." She didn't know that the man on the 52nd floor was also lying awake some nights, staring at a ceiling, thinking about a bowl of noodles and a little girl who had looked at him like he was safe. She didn't know that something in him had quietly, permanently changed. She didn't know what was coming. None of them did. 10 years can build a man into a monument. 10 years can also bring a monument crashing down. Marcus Harrington fell the way powerful men usually fall, not all at once, but in layers. First the cracks, then the crumbling, then the avalanche. It began with a bad partner. His CFO of 12 years had been quietly moving money for 3 years. Not a little money, not sloppy money, but precise, intelligent, devastating money. By the time the forensic accountants finished their work, the number had 7 figures and a criminal charge attached to someone else's name, but the damage to Harrington Enterprises was Marcus's to carry. Investors fled. Banks called loans. 2 major projects in Dubai collapsed under the weight of the scandal. The lawyers cost a fortune. The courts cost a reputation. At 44, Marcus Harrington lost almost everything. Not everything. The family home in Oak Park, his mother's house, which he'd bought for her when he made his first $100 million, was safe. A small investment account, kept separate, shielded. Enough to live on. But the tower with his name on it?
Sold.
The empire?
Gone.
The face on Forbes? Replaced with a different story now. How Harrington lost it all. He sat in his mother's kitchen on a Wednesday morning in November, drinking her coffee, staring at nothing, and for the first time in his adult life, he had absolutely nowhere to be. Elena Harrington, his mother, 68 years old and still the sharpest woman he knew, set a plate of toast in front of him without saying a word. He looked at the toast. He looked at her. "Say it," he said. She sat down across from him with her own mug. "Say what?" "Whatever you're thinking." She was quiet for a moment. She had always had the rare gift of knowing when silence was kinder than comfort. Then she said, "I'm thinking you forgot something important a long time ago. And maybe now you'll have time to remember it." "That's not helpful, Mom." "I know," she said, without apology. He didn't sleep well that winter. He didn't sleep well for many months. He had built his identity on achievement, on motion, on the constant forward thrust of acquisition and growth, and without it he felt like a compass in a world with no magnetic north, spinning, purposeless, unable to find direction. The calls from old friends mostly stopped. Not all of them, he was surprised by which ones stayed. But the business world was precise about who it celebrated and who it discarded, and Marcus had watched other men fall and thought, quietly, that they should have been smarter, worked harder, seen it coming. Now he understood what it felt like to be on the other side of that thought. It felt like falling through ice. Cold.
Fast.
Nobody reaching in. He took walks. Long, aimless walks through Chicago in the winter, hands in his pockets, breath making clouds in the gray air. He walked past Harrington Tower one afternoon, still called that, new owners hadn't changed the name yet, and stood on the sidewalk looking up at it. 42 floors of glass and steel, and everything he had built and lost. A woman came out the revolving doors carrying a coffee. She didn't look at him. He walked away. One night, his mother found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m. He was making instant noodles. She stood in the doorway in her robe, surprised. "You don't like those," she said.
He looked down at the pot.
He hadn't even realized what he'd reached for. His hands had done it on their own, some deep muscle memory of something good and simple. "Someone made these for a little girl once," he said quietly. "On the floor of my building. A little girl who was crying and hungry, and I made her noodles, and she ate them like they were the best thing she'd ever had." His mother waited. "I never knew what happened to them," he said. "Her and her mother. Rosa. I never even properly learned her last name." He stood there in the 2 a.m. kitchen and felt, for the first time since the fall, something other than emptiness. A small, real thing. A memory of warmth on a rainy night, a stuffed elephant against a wall, a voice saying that's a big name. "I was a different person then," he said, "for about 20 minutes. On that floor."
He paused.
"I think that might have been the realest I ever was." His mother crossed the kitchen and put her arms around her son, her big, accomplished, shattered son, and held him the way she had when he was small. "Then go find it again," she said into his shoulder. Whatever that was. Go find it. He didn't know how to start. But somewhere across the city, or perhaps not even in Chicago anymore, a woman named Rosa Mendez was not sitting still. She had never in her life been able to afford to sit still. While Marcus was falling, Rosa was rising. Not easily. Not quickly. Not with anyone's help. She had left Harrington Tower when Lily was 7, not because of anything bad, but because something better had finally arrived. 3 years of saving, of second jobs on weekends, of every dollar treated like it was precious, had given her enough to start. Just barely enough. But barely enough, Rosa had learned, was something. Barely enough was a door. She started Mendez Clean, just her, 2 employees, 3 commercial contracts on the south side. She drove a second-hand van with a logo she designed herself on a free website. She worked the jobs herself on the overnight shifts while Lily slept at Grandma Carmen's. She reinvested everything. She hired smart. She treated her workers the way she had always wanted to be treated, with schedules that respected their lives, with wages that actually paid bills, with the radical act of seeing them as full human beings. Word traveled. Good service traveled. Reliability in an industry that struggled with turnover was almost revolutionary. By the time Lily was 10, Mendez Clean had 40 employees and contracts across the city. By the time Lily was 13, they had expanded to 3 cities. By 15, Rosa had opened a training academy, not just cleaning but the business side, the management side, the how to build this into something yours side. She trained other women, many of them immigrants, many of them single mothers, many of them her, a decade earlier, standing in cold hallways praying not to be fired. She named the academy La Flamma, the flame. She thought of Lily every day she built it. She also, sometimes, thought of a rainy Tuesday night and a man who sat on the floor of his marble hallway and made her daughter noodles without being asked and without wanting anything in return. She had never told anyone that story. It lived inside her like something sacred, a thing too real to explain. She had looked him up sometimes over the years. Marcus Harrington. Watched his empire grow in the financial news. 3 billion. Then more. Then the scandal. Then the collapse. Then the silence. She had sat with the news of his fall for a long time the night she read it. She didn't feel satisfaction. She didn't feel judgment. She felt something softer and more complicated. The way you feel when you know someone has a kinder self buried under all the armor, and the armor finally came off, but not in the way anyone would have chosen.
She hoped he was okay.
She moved on, because Rosa Mendez had never had the luxury of staying anywhere too long. She had a company to run, a daughter to raise, a flame to keep burning. Lily, at 13, had her mother's eyes and her mother's fire and her mother's stubbornness, all of it wrapped in a teenager's certainty that she already knew everything. She was sharp and funny and deeply, fiercely kind, the kind that doesn't come from softness but from knowing what unkindness feels like. She still had the stuffed elephant. She kept it on her desk. She didn't quite remember where it came from. It had just always been there, her mother said, a faithful companion since before memory. But Lily kept it because it felt important, like a thread tied to something she couldn't see. Rosa never told her the full story of that night. Some things you keep close until the time is right. She was still waiting for the time to be right. It was Lily's idea. She was 13 years old and already helping her mother with the business, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because she had grown up watching her mother build something from nothing and had caught the fever of it. She was doing research for a school project on Chicago business leaders who had recovered from setbacks when she came across the name. "Mom," she said, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, "what do you know about Marcus Harrington?" Rosa, standing at the stove, went very still. "A little," she said carefully.
Why?
"He lost everything a few years ago. But I'm reading that he's trying to start over, some kind of consulting thing helping small businesses. But he can't get traction because nobody in the industry trusts him yet." Lily scrolled. "His reputation got really wrecked." Rosa turned slowly. "Where are you seeing this?" "Business section. There's an interview. He seems..." Lily tilted her head. "He seems different from what he used to be. Like the money made him one way, and losing it made him something else." She looked up at her mother. "You have that same look you get when you're thinking about something big." Rosa sat down at the table. She looked at her daughter, 13 years old, curly hair, brown eyes that missed absolutely nothing, and she thought about a floor. A cold marble floor. A bowl of noodles. A man who sat down without being asked. "There's something I never told you," Rosa said. And she told her. All of it. The rain, the dropped mop bucket, the crying in the hallway, the noodles, the way he had looked at Lily's small face, the way he had looked at Rosa's and said nobody's losing their job tonight, the way he had left before she could thank him, the noodles that appeared in the kitchen after, the small, quiet policy about children. Lily was silent for a long time when Rosa finished. Then she said, "He was kind when he didn't have to be." "Yes," Rosa said. "And now he needs help." "It looks like it." Lily looked at her mother with those eyes that missed nothing. "So, what are we going to do about it?" Rosa called his office the next day. The number was easy to find. It was a small operation now, nothing like the old empire. A woman answered, surprised to get a call, and then Marcus himself came on the line, which told Rosa that there wasn't much of a team left between him and the world.
"This is Rosa Mendez," she said.
"I don't know if you'll remember me. I was on your cleaning crew at Harrington Tower, about 10 years ago." A long silence. "Rosa," he said slowly. "And then, the little girl. Her name is Lily." She's 13 now. Rosa paused. She's the one who found her interview. Another silence. Longer this time. She could almost hear him reassembling something, some feeling he had packed away a long time ago. How is she? He asked.
His voice had changed.
Softer than she remembered. Worn in like good leather. Like a man who had been through something real. She's extraordinary, Rosa said. She takes after herself. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. That's a very Lily answer. She wanted me to call you. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Tell the big-name man that we pay our debts." The silence this time was the kind that has weight to it. The kind that means something is shifting. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. I know, Rosa said. That's not why we're calling. She took a breath. I run a company. Mendez Clean. We're at about 80 million in annual revenue and expanding to 5 more cities. I need a consultant who understands large-scale real estate partnerships and commercial contracts. Someone who knows how buildings work from the ownership side.
She paused.
I also think you need someone who still believes in you. And I do.
I don't know why exactly.
Maybe because of Noodles. He didn't say anything for so long that she thought the call had dropped. Rosa, he finally said. And his voice broke, just slightly, just enough. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said. Come meet us. Just come have dinner. Lily wants to meet the man who made her noodles. She's been curious about you her whole life and just didn't know it yet. He came. He walked into the restaurant on a Thursday evening in April, just a neighborhood Italian place Rosa liked, nothing like the establishments he used to frequent, and he stood in the doorway for a moment, adjusting. He was thinner than he had been. He dressed simply now. He looked, Rosa thought, like himself. Like the version of himself she had seen for 20 minutes on the floor of his building a decade ago, before the armor went back on. Lily stood up when she saw him. She was 13 and already almost as tall as Rosa, with her mother's dark curls and a confidence that filled the room before she did. She held out her hand, very formal, very deliberate, and said, Marcus Harrington. I'm Lily Mendez. I've been waiting 10 years to thank you for the noodles. He looked at her hand, then at her face, and something happened in his expression that Rosa would never fully be able to describe. A man recognizing something. A man coming home to a room he didn't know he'd left. He shook her hand. They were just instant noodles, he said. Nothing is just anything, Lily said, and sat back down with the authority of someone who had figured this out. He sat across from them and they had dinner, and it was the strangest and most ordinary thing Rosa had ever experienced. They talked for 3 hours. He asked Lily about school, about the business, about the stuffed elephant she mentioned, and Lily described it, and something moved across his face, private and deep. He asked Rosa about La Flamma, about her training model, about her expansion strategy, and as she talked his eyes sharpened, not in the old cold way, but in the way of someone genuinely engaged, genuinely present. He was good, she remembered. Beneath everything, he was genuinely good at business. That hadn't gone anywhere. He came on as a consultant 6 weeks later. Within 8 months, Rosa's expansion into 5 new cities was structured in a way that would have taken her twice as long and cost $500,000 more to figure out alone. He knew the real estate world from the inside, not from books, but from years of building and losing and learning what actually mattered. He knew which contracts to walk away from. He knew which partners kept their word. He knew the pressure points that could break a small business and the foundations that would hold. But more than that, and Rosa saw this clearly, he showed up. He answered calls. He remembered details. He treated her employees with the same careful attention he had once reserved only for investors. He had learned, it seemed in the wilderness of his fall, that people were the building. Not the glass and steel. The people. Lily worked with him on Saturdays, her choice, emphatically her choice. She had decided he was interesting and useful and that she wanted to learn from him, and Lily, once decided, was not a force that yielded to opposition. He taught her about contracts and leverage and negotiation. She taught him, he said once, how to stop thinking everything was a transaction. Not everything is a deal, she told him one afternoon, arms crossed, 13 going on 45. Some things are just things you do, because they're right. He looked at her for a long moment. Where'd you learn that?
From my mom, she said.
And from a man who made me noodles once. Mendez Clean crossed $1 billion in revenue 4 years later. Rosa was 38. Lily was 17 and already accepted to 3 universities, planning to study business and social enterprise, planning to come home and build the next chapter of what her mother had started. La Flama had trained over 2,000 women across 8 cities. The model was being studied by 2 universities as a case study in ethical business growth. On the night the accountants confirmed the number, Rosa sat in her office alone for a while before she called anyone. She thought about a hallway, a rainy night, a cold floor, a little girl with a stuffed elephant and 2 words, "I'm hungry." She thought about all the women she had trained who had once been that woman in the service corridor, sitting on a bucket, face in her hands, bracing for the worst. She thought about what it meant to be seen, not pitted, not performed for, just seen. She called Marcus. "We hit the billion," she said. She heard him exhale a long, relieved breath, like someone setting something heavy down. "Rosa," he said, "I want you to know something." "What?" "That night, when I made the noodles." He paused. "That was the first time in years I'd done something that wasn't about me. And it was the first time in years I felt like a human being." Another pause. "You didn't come back because you owed me. You came back because you're who you are. And I want you to know that it changed my life. You changed it. Twice." Rosa was quiet. Outside her window, Chicago gleamed. The same city, the same towers, the same rain-wet streets. But the view was different from here. From a desk with her name on the lease. From a chair she had carried herself to. "You were kind first," she said softly. "You were kind when it cost you nothing and also when it would have been easy not to be. That matters."
She paused.
"That's why we came back." He kept a bowl on his desk after that. Just a small ceramic bowl, nothing special. He couldn't have explained it to anyone who asked. It just felt right. A reminder of a rainy Tuesday, a cold floor, a stuffed elephant, a little voice saying "I'm hungry." Some things are just things you do, because they're right. And sometimes, 10 years later, they come back to you, not because the world is fair, and not because kindness is always repaid, but because goodness, when it is real, leaves a mark. A quiet one. A lasting one. The kind that noodles on a cold November night can somehow make.